you got to work with Jad Abu Murad.
Oh my God,
Really,
a dream come true.
Yeah, like your source of inspiration, the reason you got into this game.
Here we go. Welcome to the Miri Podcast. I'm your host طارق الميري. I hope you're doing okay. First, هذه الحلقة بالإنجليزي وفيها شوية عربي. I'd like to thank each and every one of my Patreon members. If it wasn't for you and your amazing love and care for the past 2 years, the Miri Podcast wouldn't have been where it is today. Thank you. If you're new here and already feel like you're benefiting from the content, please consider becoming a member. For as little as the price of a coffee cup or less, you can get access to behind the scenes content and video as well as exclusive updates only on Patreon. Thank you again. My guest for this week is Hiba Fisher, the CEO and co-founder of Kerning Cultures. Think the Middle East answers to Gimlet Media, Radiolab, and This American Life. If you're into podcasts like The Miris, great podcast, go check out their shows. This happens to be one of my favorite podcast episodes that I've had on The Miri, filled with value, journey, and inspiration. As we do in every episode, we talked about Hiba's journey, beginnings, and obstacles, as well as achievements, goals, and dreams. And the part that I enjoy the most, habits and routines, the stuff that will get you going, inspire you to achieve your own goals. I know you're going to enjoy this one, especially if you're into making money in the creative field. I'm excited. Ready? Let's go.
Hiba, how are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. It's early morning here. I'm in Seattle in the US of A. I had my morning tea and I am good. How are you?
Lovely. The same. I mean, it's 3 p.m. so I'm I don't know. Supposedly I'm a little more awake than you, but it's debatable. That's very debatable. But I'm quite excited that you're here. I have so many questions about so many things, but in the same sort of fashion, this is a back and forth conversation, so don't feel that it is an interview in any way, shape, or form. I do scare some people off to say I come with an agenda, but it is usually a cute agenda of trying to understand you more on a personal level and trying to understand the world that you come from. I'm a bit more nervous of what you're gonna crack.
You know? No, dude, it's a very clever technique. It's very clever.
I'm even more excited that you're setting a lot of the basic structure of what I have in mind. So, you know, CEO of the first podcasting network in the region. I hate that distinction, but I don't know how you feel about it. Female CEO,
it kind of
is.
First, dude, I don't know if we were the first, to be completely honest.
Well, to be completely honest, you're the only one I know. So that says something. In this world of media as well, generally. So aside from all of this, like, how do you do introduction for Hiba? And you do quite a lot of gigs and quite a lot of media in general. So the gist of it, the 3-minute bit of it, what would you put in there?
Of who I am as Hiba Fisher?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Hiba Fisher. I am 31. I am Egyptian American. I am the CEO and co-founder of a company called Kerning Cultures, which is a podcast network that started out of Dubai and is now in I think 7 cities across the region, and we do Arabic and English podcasts that are fabulous. You should listen. And I'm the youngest of 4 siblings. I like to cook. I like to read. I love podcasts. How's that?
What was your first podcast listening experience? Like, what got you introduced to this world?
Radiolab.
Yeah.
So Radiolab is a podcast. It's been around for, I think, upwards of 15 years. And I was introduced to it in 2008. was the first time that I was introduced to it. And actually, a girlfriend of mine sent me an email with a link to one of Radiolab's episodes. And I had never... I'm sure I had heard of what a podcast was before, but I'd never listened. And that email, I think I opened it up, and when I saw that the episode was like an hour long, I closed the email and like didn't open it up again for months, I think, because who has an hour to listen to people talk? And then I did listen on a drive, on a long drive, and I fell completely in love. And Radiolab has this really distinctive sound identity. Jad Abumrad and the team, they play so much with sound that I remember thinking how cool it was to hear how much fun somebody had at their job because they really they take a lot of liberty with the sound, and they're quite humorous in some of the sound effects that they'll use, and then the story is just this immersive documentary, and it just makes you think of the world in a completely different way. And I think I can't remember exactly which episode it was, but I know in their earlier days they had this technique where there would it would be like short vignettes within a single episode, and so they would take this like really ambitious theme like color or good or bad, and that would be the episode title. And then within that episode there would be these short stories, and each one was a story unto itself, and it would really make you rethink what you thought of that theme. And it just opened this whole world for me, and I became absolutely obsessed. And Radiolab was where I got all my topics of conversation with people to talk about at the dinner table, or new friends that I would meet. I would say, you know what I learned today, or I heard this story. So Radiolab was the gateway podcast for me.
I don't remember mine, to be honest, but it is I'd say a combination of Radiolab and This American Life, and I was jumping back and forth with a lot of the NPR basket of shows. But what's really interesting about Radiolab is that geekiness of science and dissecting sound and bringing things to life did not just stop at the science. Like, they took that format to create a better understanding of the Constitution and a lot of issues around law and social justice, and in the same fun, interesting fashion. So I guess that obsessiveness with what that format could do, set against other interests, creates even better and more interesting worlds. At that stage still, you're like, okay, this world is really interesting and I'm learning from it, which is my experience. Like, for a while I wasn't reading anything, I wasn't watching anything, but I was listening all the time. And it is filling up again, like, it is that question of like, who the hell has the time to listen to people talk for hours? But the value of the information was well worth it. And so that created an understanding of like, this world could change a lot of things. But within that, what was the sort of deciding factor for you that, okay, I need to be in this world, or was that not a right away kind of move? How long did it take?
Oh, yeah, it took years. We started our first episode of Kerning Cultures, and I started working on Kerning Cultures in 2015. So it was, 7 years. So I think my introduction to podcasts was just as this like pleasure hobby, and and then when I decided to start Kerning Cultures, it was more an instance of I'm obsessed with podcasts, and even though I do not have a background in media, I think I can imitate. That's really that was the rationale behind it.
But what was your field? What did you study? What was your focus before Kerning Cultures?
So in college, I studied something called Global Development Studies, which we were the first class to graduate with this new degree. And it was a combination of economics, politics, anthropology, and sociology. And it was a degree for kids who wanted to save the world. And so we were a small class. I think we were 22 students, and everybody had a different specialty. So some people were focused on public health, some people were focused on politics. My obsession was microfinance and supporting small businesses. And so all of my research went into how this model works, and I thought that microfinance was the answer to all the world's problems. And I'll give you the long answer. And then when I graduated from university, I ended up staying in the same town that I studied. So I went to school in the States in Virginia, and I stayed on for 2 years and co-founded a microfinance and business education organization with 3 other community leaders in the town. And we built up this microloan fund and this business training program for small entrepreneurs. So for entrepreneurs who had less than 5 employees, for example. And I did that for 2 years, and then I got really homesick, and I transitioned off and moved back. Well, not back, actually. My parents had moved to Dubai when I graduated from university, so I joined them. And then I was managing an incubator for startups. I was actually the first incubator in Dubai. So continuing on this path of supporting entrepreneurs and micro to small enterprises. And after a couple of years, I got really burnt out. So it was I had a quarter life existential crisis, you can call it, because I had been since high school, when my father first gave me, I don't know if you know who this is, Mohammed Yunus, he's like the father of microfinance. So when I first read this book by him about microfinance in high school until...
Where's he from? That might kind of ring a bell.
Grameen Bank from Bangladesh.
No reference. I need to look him up. I need to write this down. Cool. Yeah.
He's an incredible human and somebody I still look up to very much.
What's his book called?
Creating a World Without Poverty, I think, or A World Without Poverty. But I had been I don't know if you can ascertain from the little bits that I've shared. I have quite an addictive and obsessive personality. I think when I get excited about something, I kind of, that's the only thing that I see. And so with microfinance and supporting small business owners, like this was the thing since high school, basically. And then to be, how old was I? I think I was 24. To be 24 and having like this was all that I knew and what I had studied and what I thought I would dedicate my entire life to not make me happy anymore and feel like I've told this story actually on Al Empire before, but so this incubator that I worked at in Dubai was across the street from where we lived, and and in the summer it's still really freaking hot, and it's like it wasn't exactly across the street, it was like a kilometer, and so my dad would drive me to work, and I would be crying on my way to the office every single morning, like Daragodi, like this is how unhappy and miserable I was. And
what was the source of it? Like what didn't make you happy? Is it like whatever idea you had in mind does not really exist in this field, or the mechanics of it, or the fact that you're not seeing the change that you wanted to create? Like what was the source of frustration?
So the role that I played in creating education programs and creating these like financial solutions for entrepreneurs, there was that which was fun and interesting and like solving a puzzle, and then you would set that up, and then the real component that made, I think, all of that work was the relationship with every founder and the relationship with every business owner, and the way that we were doing it at the incubator in Dubai was at scale, and we were a very small team trying to do a lot, and a lot was on me, and I put a lot of pressure on myself to do more than my job description prescribed. And so I was emotionally exhausted. So I think I believed that I had to, and I was a kid, by the way, mind you, like I was also a kid, so take this as you will, but really be this, I don't want to say mentor because I don't believe that, but I was this friend to every business owner in the room. And so you would live the trials and tribulations and the successes of their businesses every single day and be that shoulder that they cry on and try to solve all of the problems as best you can with the resources that you have. Like, I don't know how to fix that, but maybe this person does, and make these connections. And so you end up just draining yourself. At least that
you're very emotionally involved with all the details. So basically, you're the mother that cares, but cares quite intimately. Is that what it is? Like, you made yourself really available for them.
Yeah, and for all of their companies. And so it was, it was just emotionally draining. And as an impact, I think the other thing that I started to realize is like. Entrepreneurship isn't for everybody. And so I had a much more romanticized idea about how I thought that entrepreneurship and microfinance could solve all the world's problems. And the deeper I got into it, the more you realize that, like, actually, I think employment is just fine. Just creating job opportunities and having people work for other people, and they get a dedicated paycheck and they go home. Like, the amount of risk and emotional grief that having your own company creates is not for everybody. And so I think it was twofold. I think it was the emotional exhaustion of just the current environment I was in, and working with so many founders. But then it was also just a bit of a disenchantment with the industry. And so I left, and then I didn't know what I would do next, because this was, in my young life, this was everything that I thought I wanted. And so I took tell me?
Should we put this one as a pause? Because the interesting bit, and now everybody knows, is this crazy place, a very difficult, challenging situation that anyone could put themselves into, and seeing it in abundance did not scare you away from doing it again. And this is what you're doing now. You are a founder of a company, and you are in that same emotional space and frustration of being a CEO of a company, trying to make something different that does not exist. So I just want to leave that idea linger, that you did not block yourself away from it. You might have exited that situation, but to get to a now place and a maybe happy place.
It's an interesting observation, actually.
Let's let that burn in the back burner for a little. Your obsession at this moment and now, away from work, away from podcasting, what is it? What takes away your mind and your thinking on the weekends, on the afternoon, that you do enjoy?
Sailing.
I see lots of Instagram photos, yeah, and I'm like, is she going to Dubai from Seattle? Is she going to Seattle from Dubai? Like, what's she doing on that boat? And there's lots of sailing photos.
Well, we haven't done a long trip yet, although my husband and I have been dreaming of what it would be like to sail around the world. But the farthest we've gone is like I think 70 nautical miles. Like, we haven't really done cross ocean at all. Yeah.
Do you need different skill set for that?
Sorry?
Do you need different skill set for longer distances?
You need a different boat and a different skill set for sure. We haven't, I don't even know what we would do if we were ever caught in a storm, for example. Like, my God, Mahmoud, my husband was watching, there's this show on, it's not a show, it's a movie. I don't know where on, called Adrift. And it's about this, it's a real story about this couple who they do this sailing trip around the world, and then they get caught in a storm, and the boyfriend falls overboard and dies, and then their boat is completely wrecked, and then the girl survives for 42 days. She like rigs a sail, like the boat is destroyed, but she like rigs the sail and manages to, with like really old school navigation with the stars and the sun, figure out how to get to Hawaii. Anyway, I was terrified watching this movie. So we are not prepared for for long distance sailing at all. But we started sailing. It's been about 3 years ago now, and we've taken a bunch of classes, and we started to go out on our own about 2 years ago, and it's I love sailing so much, and we've started to really get into the mechanics of the sailboat and learning about the engine and changing the fuel filter and things that, like, I've never looked under the hood of a car. I have no idea how all the machines in my house work, but this is the first thing that I'm learning how something works, and it's really, really cool.
Like, what started you on it? Like, what I know you said you get obsessed with things, and right away, like, you create a time and focus for them. But what was the sort of the beginning of this rope of addiction to sailing or obsession?
It was Mahmoud's urging, actually. So my father's grown up. He's grown up as a sailor. I mean, he's grown up around boats his whole life, and so raising us, we've always gone out with him sailing, but he'll just tell us what to do and I'll just do it. I've never really paid attention to how it all works, and I enjoy being out on the boat, but it wasn't I think because I didn't understand the mechanics of what we were doing, or I'd never took an interest in understanding the mechanics of what we were doing. I didn't have like such an appreciation for the sport. And then Mahmoud, my husband, 3 years ago, said, like, he signed us up for sailing lessons. And that was the first time that, I mean, it was it's actually the first experience I've had out of college where, like, you really learn, like, you're in a classroom setting, and there's exams and there's practicums on the boat and all of this, and it was so much fun. It was so much fun, and then khalas, yani, we both got infected with it, and now we're both. I think he's a bit more obsessed. I mean, he's constantly reading forums and on all of these groups and watching videos and stuff. And I think he went a little bit farther into it than I have. But it's been such a pleasure. And we did our first. We did the longest sail this summer. We went out for 8 days together. And there's a bunch of, I had no idea about this before moving to Seattle, but there's the cluster of islands off the coast of Seattle towards Canada that are just absolutely stunning. And so we went hopping from island to island, and you just cook on the boat, and you go crabbing, and we tried to fish but failed, and it's amazing. It's just such a wonderful wonderful
nice.
Life. Yeah.
One of the trips on my list with my wife is to go island hopping, either Greek islands or Turkish islands. It's not the same where it's hands-on, where you're actually navigating and knowing exactly what's happening. It's sort of a switch off type sailing situation.
But
they actually do teach you a little bit,
is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's one of those few spaces that are left for us that are not. If you choose to be, that are not super wired, so you can completely switch off and you can listen to the breeze and smell the fresh air and get your mind off of things. We're becoming slowly connected all the time to everything. So it's quite a precious space to be, where you can actually enjoy yourself and do something with your hands and mind that is not to do with the future moment,
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the things that I like, now I've become the snob and I hate powerboats. And whenever there's a powerboat that passes, it's like, but I think one of the things that I love so much about being on a sailboat is that and this realization came pretty immediately, is you're not fighting nature like a powerboat or a car or like half the machines of, you know, modern day. You're channeling it, right? Like it's what gives you the power to move, and there's just something so symbolic and beautiful in that, and I feel like in a sailboat you are a lot kinder to your surroundings, right? Like you're not making noise that's pissing off the whales underneath you. You're not like, there is a motor on the sailboat, and that's how we get in and out of the marina, but otherwise we're always raising the sails, and that's how we move. So I'm not a complete purist, but I think there's something in that I really, really appreciate. And you just, in that space, you can have such a harmonious relationship with the environment and the wind and the sun and the sea. And it's just it's extremely nourishing for the soul, 100%. And then also like the boat that we go out on is really old. And so there's no electricity, right? And so when you go out for long trips, like, I mean, we have power banks and then they die and then that's it. Like you don't, your phone's not working. And it's just, I love that. I love that so much, that you're self-sufficient without all the stuff of, you know, modern luxuries. And I mean that because we don't even have hot water.
No, just hearing you talk about it and describe it in such a way makes me not just think about it, makes me experience it, because in a way it is what we long for in this like super connected moment that we live in constantly. And it's the only connection that I might have as a comparison or contribution is getting rid of my car. Like I sold my car in Libya to buy an electric bicycle. So it's electric assist, so I still have to pedal. And obviously it's almost not by choice. If you check your phone while biking, you probably instantly die, because you have to have the balance in order to be on the road. So it is the very few simple moments of the day where I'm switching off and I'm in the moment and connecting. And because you're not in a vehicle type box, you can actually hear the sounds. Yeah. And from time to time, even though I'm in the middle of London, you can actually hear birds and you can interact with movement. So I guess it's the obsession with sound in this episode that it kind of, you know, brings everything into the present moment. I within my agenda, I'm really trying to understand how companies work and how startups work and how entrepreneurship is done in the region. And I'm having these conversations with friends of mine and a particular friend of mine who are thinking of starting something. So, but to me, I'm as far away as possible from this world. It freaks me out. So I'd love to learn the basics and the crucial bits from you, but in your own story, how it happened for you. So whether that's sort of covering a bit of the stage from the fact that you felt complete burnout and you're like, you know what, I need to back away and explore, to the first moment where you're like, you know, I need to start a podcast, finding a partner, your partner changing course, and going within that journey, going from 1 show to 7 shows, you know, 2 English shows and 5 Arabic shows, like, and you are, you know, looking for a particular exit. So you have a big goal in mind. So I don't know, like from where we left it to this moment, like whatever gaps, as many gaps as you can fill in the way that you see it, in the way that you see these are the crucial moments, and this is how this story took place, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so so when I was having my quarter life existential crisis, which is such a luxury, by the way, like I just want to pause and say that the fact that I think our generation, probably later generations, but you have this notion that your work should fulfill you, which, like, I don't think our parents and older, whether it was the luxury for it or the care for it, but I think it was more the luxury of, I mean, you just worked to make money, right? Whereas I was in a place of privilege, where I lived at home with my parents. My crucial food and shelter were covered. And so I had this space to be like, I need to do something that is meaningful. So just, I want to like acknowledge that, because I think a lot of entrepreneurship that you'll find the world over is coming from a place of privilege and luxury. A lot of it isn't, and a lot of it is. And so just recognizing both. So I took a couple of months of doing nothing really. Like, I spent it with people that I loved. I visited friends. I felt really miserable for it was about 3 or 4 months of not knowing what I wanted to do next, not knowing what I was good at either. I think that's another piece of being getting a liberal arts degree from college is it's not very concrete. Like, I didn't know how to code, so I and I also was quite confused about how I don't want to say, I guess how much I felt like I had lost control over my life and what made me happy. And so I really wanted to kind of dissect that and figure out how much of that was my own doing, and what I could change moving forward. So a couple of and the actual mechanics of those internal conversations happened in, like, I always have a notebook on me, so a lot of it was writing stuff out, recording voice memos into my phone, which I think is really prescient of starting a podcast company. And then so the realization coming out of that was, I don't think I can work for anybody else, because I don't trust, knowing that I have this character that I will give my entire self to something. I don't trust anybody else to not take advantage of that in the way that I felt had been taken advantage in previous experiences. And so that was one. I didn't want to work for anybody else. The second was I felt like I had stopped learning. And so I wanted to do something that I could constantly learn, which having a new episode every whatever, where it's like a little, like, you just dive into this world you know nothing about, and then you get to talk to a bunch of people and then learn about it, and then tell a story, is such a beautiful way to learn and really have an understanding about these things. And so that's how that led there. And then the last thing was that I wanted to, like, I'm a mixed kid, right? My mother's Egyptian, my father's American, and the two families are very different. And the way that you or that I would bridge between them is through stories. And so there was also this recognition of just the power of storytelling and the power of media. And I really think that it's something that we as Arabs don't do a good enough job of. And so there was this, like, social element of, I really think that media can play a very strong role. And I hate the radio in Dubai. It hurts my soul. It's so bad. And
why?
And then you have this.
What's it like? What's it like? What's the radio like there?
It's either really political, it's either very vapid, meaning there's like nothing. I can't believe that you're wasting airways, and I'm sorry for anybody who's listening to this and works at some of the radio stations. I really apologize, but you need to do a much better job. It's a lot of talk show. It's a lot of music. It's a lot of I find it's a lot of emptiness.
There's no value for that attention that they're getting. Basically, they're not giving something back to the people that are giving their times to listen.
No, I don't think so. At least in my definition of what value is, and I think also the contrast with that and NPR, for example, and Radiolab and all of these podcasts that have really transformed so much of my life and have transformed the most boring moments of my life, which is like, when you're driving and all of that. I think there was that realization that we could do better. And So all of that kind of coalesced.
And you're still in Dubai at this particular moment of soul searching and outside sort of exploring and researching. You're still in Dubai, right? Like,
I spent about a month in the States. So I came to visit a friend, and then the rest of it was in Dubai in my parents' home. Yeah. And it kind of all converged around MIT Arab Enterprise Forum. Is I think they're on. I don't know how many years they've been doing this, but it's an annual event where they'll bring entrepreneurs together from all across the region. And in my year, they'll put you all in a hotel for 5 days, and then there's a competition at the end of it and a series of workshops, and you apply to be a part of this, and it's this big competitive pool, and whatever, they select a certain number of people to be a part. So all of this kind of soul searching and thinking about what I wanted to do next, it all converged in this idea of starting a podcast, and that's. To your question of how companies get built, the early iteration of Kerning Cultures was much smaller, right? So it was this idea of one show, and it happened that this MIT Arab Enterprise Forum was happening, I think a couple of months later, and so I applied, and as part of the application process, you had to fill in what they call a business model canvas, which is just a one-page business plan. And the value of that exercise is just to start to put down on paper exactly what this idea of a company is. And so thinking about who the target customer was, thinking about how you're going to make money. So I think that was turning point number one, was just putting these ideas on paper. Turning point number two happened at the actual event where we didn't win. It was just me at the time. I didn't win anything at the competition. But the guy who was recording, he was videotaping the conference for media after. A man named Ramzi Bashur ended up being our first sound designer, and so he and I would go off to the side of the conference and get into these long conversations. And I knew nothing about audio, and he had a background in film and a background in audio, and so he would we just have these long talks. And then I said, well, why don't we work together? And we still work together. I mean, he's incredible. He taught me so much about audio. He taught me what equipment to get, what recording gear to get, how to edit. So that was a big milestone, I think, when you start to build the team. And honestly, what was really, like, I think this entire idea of Kerning Cultures, like, we wouldn't have the reason that we started to grow in terms of having more producers join us and really become something was because Ramzi and I had worked on these first couple of episodes together, and we released them, and so there was something for listeners to listen to. And that's how Alex Atack found us. That's how Dana Balut found us. That's how, who was my co-founder, Razana Zayani, found us. Like, I think it's incredibly important to take this idea that you have and actually have it manifest into something that people can see and they can touch and they can feel, and in this case, they can listen to. And then that really... then people know what it is that you're dealing with or what it is that you want to do. And so that's really how everybody who works with Kerning Cultures found us, is because they first heard these really crappy episodes, by the way. I mean, when I listened,
I was going to ask you, what were they? Like, what were they about? How did they sound like? What was the inspiration, that kind of thing?
They're still on the Kerning Cultures show feed. So if you scroll all the way back to 2015, you can hear them. They're really bad. The first 3 episodes were about entrepreneurship. So about, stuff that I knew. And the sound is very different, and the audio quality is terrible. And we didn't know what we were doing. And the way that I talk is so bad. The narration is terrible. But it was something that people could hear and then really understand what it was that we were trying to do. And so that's how we got, alhamdulillah, really, really lucky with the team and the people who joined early on who are still with us. I mean it. I think it's really important to actually build the thing that you want to build in the smallest iteration of it, because that's how you'll get to the next step.
Mm-mm. No, I truly sort of believe in that, knowing that everyone listening has 1,000,001 ideas, and some of them are developed, but some of them are not. But we kind of create these mental obstacles to give ourselves excuses not to take the next step, and that makes it just an idea. That makes it quite challenging to develop to something better. So I guess much similar to my beginning, which is going to be exactly 1 year on the 15th of October.
You've only been at this for a year? Oh my God, Tara, I thought you were at this for way longer. Wow. Mabruk,
Hey,
this
but
is a big deal.
Is it because I look old now that you can see my
No,
face?
it's because you're so legit. Like, I'm really impressed, mashallah.
It's the monotone, greasy, bassy voice, you know, and lucky to be working with Mukhtar as an editor, I think.
No,
yeah. So
what you've built in a year is exceptional. You should feel really, really proud.
thank you. That means so much coming from you, knowing how much you know about this business, and the fact that you have 7 shows, not just one city show. The interesting bit, the real kick is promising myself that I'm gonna record 6. Not publish anything, but record. Actually convince people that I'm starting something, book them in, interview them, ask them questions, film it, record it. The biggest challenge was actually to get the first, because my wife said, sorry, I don't believe in this, even though she believes in everything that I've done before. And she's like absolutely encouraging. She always does the name brainstorming, the market research. She's a corporate lawyer by trade, by profession, but she's like, Tarek, this thing doesn't exist. Like, what do you interview me on what basis? So that was a complete surprise. But trying every trick I had between friends, between interests and network, I managed to get 6. And I just hit publish, and I had completely no expectations. And because of that no expectation model, and just do it and do everything you can, and then just do the next bit is the real, I think, reason things come to life. So in a way, the fact that you still keep those early episodes as a reminder of the beginning.
Well, you should delete them.
Very, very, very courageous of you. I don't even listen to last week's episodes anymore, because that's torture. But there is this feeling to me that you see what it is you're aiming for, which I do not from my angle. Like, I don't know how big this thing could be. I don't know what the next step is, but because you build it and I don't want to say the classical fashion of a startup, which, you bring something to the world that solves a problem that does not exist, in the hopes that someone sees that and they're like, yes, we see your dream, we're going to make it bigger. Ta-da, you're granted. There's so much struggle to get to that stage. So what are the expectations of those stages, and what have you experienced? What were the struggles, and what is the step that you're on based on the progress that you have in mind, or sort of the steps to get to the goal?
Well, we've been at this now for coming up on 6 years, and the vision, I would say the mission has always been consistent, and that's been defined from day one. Everybody who joins Kerning Cultures joins for the same reason, that we wanna make radio, we wanna make stories that we're all really proud of, and tell stories that we actually care about and that are exciting and pull at our heartstrings and make us laugh and make us cry and bring us all closer together, because, as you said, there's something about sound that's just really intimate in such a beautiful way. So that's always been consistent. I would say the vision of where Kerning Cultures as a company can go is iterative vision. So it wasn't, I mean, sketching out the idea of KC on that business model canvas for this startup competition about 6 years ago was not the same thing, right? And I think the deeper you get into something, the more you try things, the more research you do about the industry. Like, I think that's one of the things that my dad is the one who told me this. You know, if you dedicate 20 minutes a day, which I don't think I do on a daily basis, but if you dedicate 20 minutes a day to reading about a subject area that you're interested in, then within a year, it's about the equivalent of reading 60 books, right? And you are an expert on the topic, and nobody can tell you otherwise. And so this is something that I take very seriously, is learning about the podcast industry as much as I can.
I'm going to write this down, by the way. I'm going to quote. What's your dad's name?
My dad, his name is Omar Clark Fisher.
Clark Fisher. He's been quoted.
Daddy, you've been quoted.
Cool.
So this is over the years, I spend a lot of time studying the industry, and the more that you learn it, the more that you understand it, and the more that you can understand your place in it. And so this grand vision that we have for Kerning Cultures, where inshallah we're building this media empire, we want we want to grow to, you know, dozens and dozens of shows underneath our network and reach millions of listeners across the region, and then eventually get acquired by Spotify or Deezer for, inshallah, a ton of money, and then continue to do the storytelling piece within their frameworks. This is a I would say we've probably been holding on to this vision in the past 2 years, for example. So I think the clarity of what you're building continues to evolve the more that you learn about the space and the company itself. I don't remember what the first part of your question was. What else can I say?
I think in between from now till that dream comes true, and this is the struggle I'm in, the struggle of everyone asking me that is inspired by your shows or one of my episodes. They're like, okay, Tariq, I get it. I love it. I'm bought in. But if I start my own podcast tomorrow, where do I make money? How do I make the money? Obviously, it's a different track for you. You're not really thinking of that now, but also there is ads and there's the potential for other type of products to tag along into this. But realistically, for the smaller shows that want to talk about, you know, something local, or for the shows that are kind of covering a major issue on the region, and you being the person who is consuming and researching and the expert on the podcasting within the region, is there money to be made if you're a one show? Is there money to be made if you're a local show? Or that is not in the formula right now, but it will be? Like, what's your take on money in podcasting?
Yeah, dude, there's a lot of money to be made. Regardless of how niche you are, I think understanding who your audience is the most important part. And so something that we do at KC is we'll interview our listeners on a regular basis. And so that's one way that you can get to know what they want, why they listen, what they're interested in, what they want more of, what they want less of. That's always been a core part of how we do things, and I think it's very, very important. And so I think in terms of the monetization piece, there's a number of different ways. So the business model of a podcast or a podcasting network is the same. So you could sell ads, and regardless of how big your audience is, as long as you know exactly, as I mentioned, who they are and what they want, then you can tailor messaging accordingly to them. And so you can approach brands that want to reach those listeners, and you approach them and you tell them, I have X number of listeners. Would you like to talk to them through an ad that you pay me for? And you could have it be a one-off. You could have it be a full sponsorship for a season, for example. You can license the rights of your stories. And so you can sell the rights to air on radio, on other podcasts. You can host events. This is a little bit less less of a possibility in a COVID world, but I mean, people pay for Zoom conferences. Like there's ways that you can kind of get around that. That's a really big part of the business model in markets like the US, where they'll do these road shows, and they'll get the like people there's you really have I mean, I struggle with this personally, but I know that your audience feels like they know you, right? And they want to meet you. And so having an event where they can come and pay a ticket to watch you interview somebody or watch you do a live performance is something that people would pay for. So there's events ticketing. There's a membership option. And so again, regardless of how many listeners you have, they're listening, right? And they're finding value in spending however long time with you listening to the content that you put out. And so you can ask them to pay for that the same way that you pay for, Netflix or Anghami or Shahid or whatever. Like you can, and there's a bunch of membership portals that you can use to facilitate the payments. We've tried a couple. The one that is best for us is a platform called Patreon, and then the last way there's two. So then, in addition to memberships, another sort of pillar of the podcasting business model is you can put your content behind a straight up paywall, and so it's you cannot access this content unless you pay for it. I think that is a little bit premature for the Arab world. We're just learning how to pay for content, and podcasting is still quite new. But who's to say that couldn't be a core revenue driver in the near future? It is in a lot of other markets, like China relies on paid subscriptions for podcasts quite heavily. And then the last is what we call white label production. And so you are a talented podcast producer. People can hire you to produce podcasts for them. So those are, I think, six or seven ways that you can make money from your podcasts.
Definitely. I mean, they should pay you for this one tip of 6. No, it's all growing for sure. And it's, I guess the more podcasts there is, the more people will pay attention to it. And it seems like there are also big networks, from traditional media in the region who are producing their own particular news show or their own particular business show. Some of it might seem right off the bat that it's the English version of the Arabic version of that American show, or so people are quite familiar with the format. So in other ways, the old big boys are also looking at this as another way of like, oh, we need to get that new audience. They're not sitting there watching the big screen anymore. They're too distracted in the social media. Where's the depth that we can grab their attention? So in a way, it is coming full circle, and it's quite apparent. But at the same time, I don't know if you see this as well. Does it still feel like early days, or is it couple of steps ahead of that when it comes to podcasting in Arabic in the region?
I don't think it's early days anymore. Early days is when we would walk into a room and people would say, "Shu yani podcast." It's not like that anymore. I think it's growing really fast. I think it's a known medium. I think we have a long way to go in terms of what they call penetration, so the number of listeners in the region. But I believe in this medium. Obviously, I'm dedicating my time to it and helping, inshallah, to build out the space. So I don't think we're early days anymore. I would say we're starting to crawl. We haven't we're not walking or running yet, but we're definitely crawling.
That's comforting for me. My question now in here is, how do you do it? Living in Seattle, leaving Dubai. I met Alex, was it earlier this year? It's very difficult to put a reference on time after Corona, like everything is the same. But I think I met Alex early this year in London, quite close to where I live. And he's like, yeah, we're a team of 12. I can't remember the exact number. He's like, but we work, we know each other, but he almost mentioned that we've never met. I know you guys met because I saw a picture of you together. So
some of us have not met in person. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've worked with the other Hiba on Bihub, which is one of my favorite shows that you guys make. A new season is coming out, right?
Yeah, we just dropped the trailer for season 2, and this show is killing it. It's our most popular podcast, actually. It tops every podcast chart for the duration of its run. It's really freaking good. But it's a show about love and relationships, but it is not a fluffy love show. It's really good.
It's quite deep and quite emotional, and the story I've worked in was kind of a continuation on an episode that I've had, and the character that I interviewed was quite generous to go so deep with her story, and I quite enjoyed working on it with Hiba, and her excitement around it was really amazing. That was from the previous season. But my question here is really, how do you work with teams from all over the world, located all over the world, with ridiculous time zone differences, to create 7 shows and manage a variety of seasons together? Like, how do you do it is the question, you know?
Magic, Tore. It's magic. Practically how we do it is the really wonderful thing about podcasts is that you can do it remotely, right? The physical audio file is quite lightweight, and so transferring across computers is really easy. All of our stuff is in Dropbox and Google Drive, so we use the cloud for everything, and you can, with some of the audio editing softwares, you can even be working on the exact same session, right? And so we use a lot of collaborative tools, a lot of collaborative cloud tools for that physical work. This wasn't our intention by any means. I mean, when we started Kerning Cultures, we were all in Dubai together, and then we all kind of scattered. I got married. My husband lives in Seattle, so I still go back and forth regularly. And it's just kind of been this, it's just this thing that happens. And then when we realized that we were good at working remotely, then it didn't matter when we hired people where they were based, because we knew that we had a good working relationship regardless. We have regular team calls, and so the constant check-in is really important to build that sense of a team, and it is quite extraordinary. There's a couple of people on the team that I have not met in real life. And so it's not just that, it's crazy actually to think about. And Dana is a really good example of this. She and I worked together for 3 or 4 years, and we would, write letters to each other and tell each other that we loved each other, and we'd never met in person until about 2 years ago, actually, which is psycho to think about. But you can really create deep, meaningful relationships in modern society with the technology that we have at our disposal. And then from a practical standpoint, I mean, we're a startup. We're all hustling really hard, and actually the fact that we're across 6 different time zones is to our advantage. It means that as a company, we're literally working like 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. So from that perspective, it's really good, and it actually helps with the production cycle, because one person goes to sleep and hands it off, and then the next person picks it up. But طبعاً we also lose out I guess everybody does now, because the world is still working remotely for the most part. But for a while, you do feel like you lose out on the spontaneity of conversations. You can't turn around and, go grab a coffee with your colleague. Like we don't have that opportunity. And I know that's critical. And one day maybe we will converge a little bit more in certain cities. I don't know, but for now it's working well, alhamdulillah. And we try to meet as often as we can in physical real life, which is always a treat. And I find like you end up touching people's faces a lot, and you're like, oh my God, you're real. So yeah.
If I was into conspiracy, I would say you guys were, you got tipped off about COVID years ago. You designed your systems to be COVID compatible and futuristic. So I don't know what else you know, Hiba. I'm quite suspicious, to be honest. It's safe to say that COVID did not change much for you guys' day to day in a way, which is positive, which is really good. So you've making the best of it, even though still it kind of drains everyone out and kind of changes the amount of energy you can have and focus. But no, it is really inspiring, and part of the reason I opened up to working with teams as well. Like my editor Mukhtar is in Tunis, my graphic designer I'm working with is in Libya, in Benghazi, and I have a few people collaborating on and off that are working from Amman, Jordan. So it is interesting what you could do with Slack and a bit of cloud management, especially for the audio world, for sure. It's not going full circle, but I'm quite jealous of you, and for many reasons. But number one is you got to work with Jad Abu Murad.
Oh my God, a dream come true.
Yeah, like your source of inspiration, the reason you got into this game, you got to meet, you got to work with, and you have an episode out on Radiolab. How does that feel? Like that must be like almost bigger than being bought by Spotify, right? Equal?
It's funny. I was talking to a mentor after the Radiolab episode aired, and I was, positively giddy, as we all still are, and saying like, this is the pinnacle of my career. And he looks back at me and he's like, no, it's not. Like, khalas, you've reached this. Like, you need to dream bigger now. And I'm like, oh, like you're right. Like. So but you also need to stop and celebrate, which I encourage a lot more, because you can just zoom by these big landmarks and think what's next, and get exhausted, Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree. It was a really, really big deal. And it was such an honor to work with him. He's so I had the pleasure of interviewing him for another one of our shows called Al Empire, which is an English show featuring exceptional Arabs around the world and their journeys to the top. And I chased him, for lack of a better word, for that interview for months, and flew out to New York to meet with him. And he ended up being very generous with his time, and we basically spent an afternoon together, which was I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting an hour, like, in and out. And then he surprised me and was like, why don't you come along with my, as I go pick up my kids from school? And
I love that moment in the car. It's quite nice. It just puts you in the scene. It's not the classical sort of sit down that you get to experience in other shows. So that's amazing, sort of dealing with the situation from your end,
Yeah, I was very flustered that day, like so flustered. I wasn't prepared for an on-the-move interview at all. But I think from that day of spending a bit more time with him, like, he's certainly been a big part of my life, but like he didn't know who I was, and then a couple of months later, he messaged to say that he was listening to Kerning Cultures, which I like peed my pants, frankly. like
stop it, don't do it.
Like, what? And loved that episode that Alex did of Lebanon USA, and wanted to do something together. And then getting to see a little bit of the behind the scenes process and how they think about stories and how they interview and the editorial like, it was just, he's I think one of the things that I'm I can't believe it. Like, I know that it happened, but I can't believe it. And that's just, I think, part of my personality is I don't know. This sounds a little bit morbid. I think it comes from a place of humility, maybe, that like I just don't believe the good stuff, like I know that it's there, but I like don't believe that it happened. And then I think to have this guy who's been such an icon and a role model, and like everything we do is an effort to try to be like him, to have him not only know that you exist, but also like your work, is just, yeah, it's everything. Really, it's everything. And now it's a little tidbit that I drop in all conversations with clients or investors of like, oh yeah, our stuff's on Radiolab.
Well earned. It was a long journey to get there, and it's nice that there's so much to do, and so much in your list of goals to achieve that you're not distracted by the one. And it is so weird, right? When you get to do it, when you get to achieve the things that are on your list, like it's even though you are in the moment and you're reflecting on it, but it's still something about it feels like, is this it? Is this not it? And I don't know if it's that mentality of you not being so observed of like, yes, this is me, I've done it, is is an important factor for you to achieve more, or if it's just this sort of over analytical character that I do share with you. Like a lot of the milestones that got achieved in the way of this, I'm not completely absorbed by, because I know that's the end of the line. If I'm stuck there, I'll just be stuck there for a long time. I mean, one thing that is really interesting and inspiring is sort of not just the remote management of what you do, but your ability to do stories in complicated spaces and challenging situations from the outside. Does that change the perspective? Does that add to the presentation of it, that you come in with, as you mentioned, you're a mixed kid, a lot of the team is outside, they're looking at it from the lens of the audiences that are maybe curious or really interested in the Middle East or the region. It's sort of having these multiple layers of seeing that world. Does that add to it, or does that make it distant? Does that make it unique? How do you perceive the storytelling aspect?
So a couple of answers to that question. So the first is, I would say that that sometimes we do stories that were very much our stories as well. And so not all of what we do is something that we don't really know a lot about. I think that's a powerful place to start. But a lot of the stories that we'll do are very deeply our own stories, told through other guests and characters who give us the honor of their time and their heart. I think that to your question, so this is something that actually, I feel like this is the Jad Abumrad episode. This is something that Jad has articulated that really resonated with me, and it's something that I do think about in this instance of being like from somewhere but not really from somewhere, gives you enough empathy that you can ask all the right questions and really get deep into a conversation. But being not from there also gives you this more zoomed out view, such that you can really you can tell the story well, if that makes sense. And I do think that is the mode of every good journalist, is that you are close enough that you can understand what's happening, but not so close that you're so embedded within it that you can't see the forest for the trees in the conversation that you're happening, or be thinking about how the listener is going to perceive this, which is always like top of mind in every interview we do. Is like, I hear what you're saying and I'm thinking about how is the listener going to hear this, and do I need to ask a follow-up question or whatever it might be. So I think that having that kind of being close enough but not too close is really important. And for us to be doing stories from all across the region, like we're we've done stories in Tunis, and we've done stories with you in Libya, and I've never been to either of those countries, and I think working with local producers really helps have that sense of empathy. I think we're all Arab at the end of the day, and so there's like a common thread of empathy across, I think. But yeah, I think you need both, and I think that the stories that are the hardest and the most personally gratifying are also the ones, the episodes that we do that are really our own stories as well. And so I'm thinking of a couple that we've done over the years that are really that hit very, very close to home. And I think to have a platform where we're able to really unpack these issues and then share them with our audience is really quite extraordinary.
No, I think it's quite an interesting insight, because it's it is almost the beauty of having the best of both worlds. You're an insider that has an outsider lens. You know, as you mentioned, you're close, but you're not stuck in the middle of it, drowning with the details. You're able to explain it further. At the same time, you're not an international journalist who's looking at it from a completely different perspective, and it's almost, for the lack of a better word, or a description of that world, and you can clearly hear the tone of my voice. I'm suffering from it when I hear coverage about Libya or Tunis or Yemen from an international journalist. It's always done in this sort of generalized way. It's not really human enough, and it's not really close enough, and that layer kind of adds distance to the story, as opposed to understanding it and feeling it and having a lot of clarity around it. So no, I completely see that and experience that in a lot of your shows. The particular thing that's stuck in my head is this, and this is the question I usually end with a lot of the guests, is sort of what do you do for the first hour of your day? I know I've stole the first 2 hours of your day today. That kind of sets your day right in order for you to hit all the beats that you want. So what makes your it's more or less just the morning routine, but like what's particular about it, or sort of ordinary about it, that makes you have a good day, makes you have a productive day, a day that you're satisfied with when it's over?
I'll give you two scenarios. It depends where I am. So if I'm in Seattle, because of the time difference, I'm often doing calls. The earliest I'll take a call is 5 a.m. And so I have spoken to other founders who, block off the first 2 hours of their day, and they take like an ice bath, and they do yoga, and they journal. And I don't have the luxury of that because I'd be waking up at 2. So when I'm in the States, I wake up. I put on clothes now because we're all video conferencing. We didn't used to do this during COVID. I put on clothes and I make myself a cup of tea and I dive straight in. And there's literally I wake up and I'm on a call. When I'm in Dubai and I'm operating on normal hours, then I don't wake up as early, but I'll wake up, I don't know, at 6 or 7, and I'll go for a walk on the beach with my mom. And I'll come home, I'll make coffee, I'll get dressed, and then I go in so when I'm in the States, that kind of centering piece happens in the middle of the day. So I'll do a chunk I'll probably be on calls for maybe 4 or 5 hours, and then I'll take a break, and then I'll go for a jog and listen to a podcast, or I'll go for a walk, and I think, or I'll do a little bit of stretching. There's always something, and I don't do this every day. I am not my best self by any means, but I try as much as I can. But I do think that element of getting in touch with my physical body is really important. And so whether it's going for a walk or a jog or just stretching, and when I'm in the States, it happens in the middle of the day because I just I just can't do it prior. And when I'm in Dubai, it happens first thing in the morning. And I would prefer that because then I'm not, it also makes when you speak to me that early in the morning, it literally takes me about 5 minutes to just get my brain working. And a lot of the times I just shake my head after a call and I'm like, I can't believe I just said that. Anyway, so.
Which, obviously this is me trying to write some of your recommendations. Aside from Radiolab, what do you listen to now? What do you have time to listen to? Aside from Kerning Cultures and Radiolab, let's say.
I'm going to tell you a secret. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts that are not ours anymore. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Unless we're going on a long drive. And so the last show, I listened to a couple of Fingen's episodes recently, and prior to that I listened to Wind of Change by Crooked Media and Spotify, which is about this like conspiracy that one of the most popular hits of all time in the 90s
Is it a series?
was written by the CIA. Anyway, it's
is this a series podcast or is it interview based? Is it like
it's a
scripted?
documentary
Okay.
investigative show, and it's pretty insane. It's called Wind of Change. So unless there's like a long stretch, like I'm traveling somewhere, then I will listen to other podcasts. Otherwise, in my
I'm in
daily
the same.
routine.
I keep asking people that are in the business, and I keep asking people like, and so do you still have time to listen? And everyone is like, no, I just do tune in for 10 minutes and I'm out. And I lost the time to listen, but the only thing that makes me able to listen, if there's something really, really crucially in my mind that it happens to be conversational or, you know, not very produced, I used 1.5 and double speed to go through it. Yeah.
Got it. That's so. I can't believe you're one of those.
I know. Recently, my wife freaks out. She's like, "What are you doing? How do you even do this?" It's it's not for the stuff that has story in it. No, not for stuff that has value, need to be in the moment. The stuff that is informational. I do this also for audiobooks because I can't focus, and I need to be creating stuff. That's the thing, you know. and I don't want to be behind, you know. I need to take your dad's tip. I need my 20 minutes of doses of stuff so I can be an expert by the time the year is over. No, don't worry, I'm not trying to convert you. It's a preference thing. It's really by the way, it's different depending on the app. Some apps are really crap at this. Audible is good, decent. Castro, the podcast app, has really good speed control playback type thing, but from your reaction I don't think you're gonna do it, so I'm not I'm not holding my breath. please don't puke in the middle of this interview. One thing I missed, obviously I'm gonna ask you about the future and you have a clear idea what that looks like, but the obstacle, the challenging time, you might have brushed through it really quickly, is when you particularly mentioned you had a business partner, and at one of these junctures, I don't remember the exact word, things change, life changes, interests change. Can you walk me through it a bit, and based on that, what is your realization of getting a partner, dealing with business partners, thinking about partners for someone who's in that boat or about to get on it? But zooming into what happened, basically.
Yeah. So what happened is my co-founder Rizan joined Kerning Cultures in the very beginning, and then we worked together for 2 years, and then she stepped back, and I adore her so much. I love her very much. I have so much respect for the way her mind works, and she's an incredibly talented journalist.
Were you friends before, or you mentioned you met for the aspect of partnering up?
We were friends before. We weren't very close. We were in this like community together. But we weren't super close. We became very close through Kerning Cultures, and through working together. And when she stepped back, it was really, really hard for me. So one thing to know is, as I mentioned, that I didn't have a background in media going into Kerning Cultures, and so when I was thinking about building out a team, Rizan was so perfect because she'd been working as a journalist in the region for 10 years, and she's incredibly talented and taught me so much about storytelling and production, and we learned a lot together. And so when you're thinking about a partner, thinking about the archetype and what each person, like what their skill sets are, is really important. I think building a company, building a new initiative with a partner is so much better. You have somebody to talk to, you have somebody to strategize with, you have somebody to divide the work with. And so when she stepped back, it was really, really hard. We were still at an iteration. Actually, she stepped back just at the time when we joined when we got our first injection of outside capital. And so we went through this media accelerator in San Francisco, actually. And so that was when we started to, prior to that, people involved with Kerning Cultures were either volunteering, or it was for like basically volunteering in terms of the amount of money that we were able to compensate people for. And so this was the first time that we were able to have a bit more structured of a team. And so I had a moment of thinking of, okay, well, do I need to find a new co-founder after she left? And then there was this realization that, well, if we build the team right, then all of those gaps will be filled. And so that was the choice. And alhamdulillah, it's been working fine. I will say, like, I miss her a lot. And I still reach out to her, and she's been something of an advisor, I would say, over the years since. And so I think there is a component of, when you have a partner, you can talk about some of these high-level strategy decisions in a way that is a little bit harder to do with the whole team. I think as a company culture, we're extremely, it's a very flat organization, and everybody is involved in decision-making in general, but there's certain things that, you know, it's just good to kind of talk through. And so that part is missing. I've turned to my husband for that. And then every once in a while I'll pick up the phone and talk to Razan, and she's marvelous and supportive. And, but yeah, that was really difficult. Like, there was a period of a couple of months where, you do feel like, well, shit, should I still be doing this? You know, like, I think that part is very real. Alhamdulillah, we got through it. But I do think that building with partners is a lot easier.
I cannot say I agree or disagree. My experience is quite limited in that corner. But what's really inspiring is you, within a short amount of time, you managed to fill in the gap of, you know, as you mentioned, you don't come from a media background, but when you turn on those episodes, that doesn't come across, you know, like the way you present the story, the voice delivery, the interest around journalism. That's what's entrepreneurially inspiring about you, that you're like, I have a gap, I need to fill it, and it's done. It's not like you're not restricting yourself. You're not building a block where you're like, no, I did not study this, and I'm an entrepreneur, or I'm a business person. So that to me is quite an interesting skill on its own, to be able to allow yourself to explore and learn and you know, basically overcome that obstacle. It sounds quite easy the way I talk about it, but I'm sure it's a lot of work. So,
well, I think that that myth that that you had to have like gotten a degree in something to be good at it, I think like we're way past that as a society. I mean, you just look at all of the tech companies of the world where kids dropped out, right, of school, and they, like the Mark Zuckerbergs and Bill Gates of the world, right? Like, that's just, I think, khalas, we're past that. I think as a founder operating in an industry that you don't have prior experience in, well, then you just need to get that experience. And so it's like we're all self-taught. We studied as much as we could, but it was just a lot of making mistakes and really bad episodes, frankly, that I think got us to a point. And we're constantly improving. Like, actually, we ran on the Kerning Culture show, which is an English show. We dropped a rerun of an episode that we had produced in 2018, which isn't that long ago. And listening to it, I was cringing. And when we talked about this as a team, and Muhammad, who's our sound designer, who's always such an optimistic, wonderful human, he put it in such a lovely way. And he said, well, the fact that you feel that way means that we've gotten so much better, right? And that we're constantly improving. And so I think that that's a good thing, to, like, you're always going to put stuff out, and then a couple years later, I hope we're still cringing at it, you know, which just means that we've continually upped the bar. So I think it's a natural part of the process for anybody, even if you were super professional and studied this. That's actually something that Izan had told me early on, because she studied journalism. That's what her university degree is in. And yes, she knew a lot of principles and she knew a lot of techniques, but so much of what she learned was on the job, right? And I think the key of any skill is just practice, right?
You've mentioned looking ahead 2 years, producing new stuff. I don't know, it's your pick. If you want to zoom, whichever it is, I hope Corona does not still in effect. Whether it's 5 years or 10 years from now, like, what does KC look like? What does it sound like? How many shows? What kind of shows? Some numbers if you have. What is the dream scenario for the future? And also on a personal level, what would Hiba be doing?
I hope, inshallah, that in 2 years we have a lot more shows. I don't know, maybe like 20 shows underneath the umbrella of the Kerning Cultures Network. I really want us to experiment with a bunch of different kinds of genres. And so there's so much that we want to play with. We're working on our first scripted fiction show right now, which I'm so freaking excited about. It's, inshallah, it's going to be positively epic. I want to do more stuff like that. And we don't have any idea what we're doing, by the way. Like, the past couple of weeks have been insane from a logistics perspective. And just, I think, the realization that, like, we really don't know what we're doing and we're making stuff up as we go along is exciting. And I'm super... I can't wait, inshallah, for it to go live. I think it's gonna be so good, inshallah. So I want to get even more ambitious with the kinds of stories that we tell, with the kinds of genres that we produce. I really we've had this vision from the early days of KC. Rizan and I would talk about this, of having like on our website there would be a map. Sorry, I puffed. Of the Middle East, and and we'd put a pin in all of the cities where we had producers. And so I would really, really love to work with a lot more producers across the region. And we've never produced stories from Syria. We've never produced stories from Algeria. We've never, like, there's so many places that I would love for us to do production from. And from a company perspective, inshallah, we're even bigger. We have a couple of professional studio setups. Wouldn't that be such a luxury instead of sitting in our bedrooms and in closets? And
I mean, to be fair, like I think Jad and Ira Glass, the whole gang, everyone is stuck in a closet somewhere, speaking under a blanket and just cushioning things around. So we're big, you know, just as big as everyone else.
I've seen that photo of Ira Glass, and I was laughing so hard because why the heck is he in a suit? Like, he's in a suit in his kid's closet.
I think I have a tiny explanation for that. Is like I don't know if you see, I have these silly suspenders on.
I do.
Under a sweatshirt, sometimes under, you know, over a t-shirt, and to me it just says, you know, bring your game face on. This is something special. Be in the moment. I don't know. Maybe he comes from that generation of, like, you actually have to wear. Well, he doesn't. He's quite casual in his normal settings, as far as I can remember. He's meant to be in London actually this year, like at the Royal Albert Hall, and of like a sold out show. I was so tempted to buy a ticket. I did not, but everything's cancelled because of COVID. So I interrupted you at the moment where you're about to go personal. And by the way, it's 5 to 10 years from now. It's not 2, so feel free to
stretch that.
Yeah.
Well, I hope it's the same thing, just like amplified, frankly. And then where do I want to be as Hiba? I hope that my parents are living near to us. I don't know where that makes us, whether we're here or in Dubai, or I don't know. My dad sometimes talks about moving to
Why Algeria?
I think the sea. I think he really loves the beaches there. I hope, inshallah, that we have a family of our own. I hope that we've done some kind of a sailing sabbatical. I don't think we'll have sailed around the world, but like I don't know. I think it'd be really cool to do like 2 months on a sailboat. I think that would be incredible. Yeah. I hope I'm still healthy, inshallah.
Are you gonna record the sail journey? Is that like a documentary series? Like,
Dude,
see what the outcome is.
I have so much respect for Alex Bloomberg, who's the host of Startup, who recorded the entire process of that first season of Startup, of him building Gimlet Media, the podcast company. Razan and I tried to do it actually with Kerning Cultures. And I think we kept it up for about a month, where we recorded every conversation and then every post conversation. It is so hard. It is so hard to always have the mic on. It is so hard to have enough batteries on you all the time. It is so hard to, like, I don't want to have the mic on, and you need to have it on all the time to really catch the good stuff. Like the fact that Alex Bloomberg recorded these intimate conversations with his wife in the middle of the night, like, dude, I don't want, I have so much respect. It's very, very hard. So I don't know if somebody else is going to do it, then maybe on our team, but I don't know if I have the discipline to keep the mic on all the time.
It's a different game. But I don't know. I'm trying to think of the next 20 episodes you guys are gonna 20 shows, and the fiction one sounds quite interesting. I've learned quite a lot. I've taken some notes, much more than I usually do, to be honest. Not that I wasn't focused, it's just because I don't want to miss out, And as I told you, I don't listen to the episodes anymore, so I want to get the notes out right away. Hiba, you've inspired me, and I don't think my question journey will stop here. I hope you don't mind if I hammer you with a few questions in the future.
Of course. Really, it's been such a pleasure. And as I said at the beginning, Yani, it's the first time that we've like actually spoken face to face, which is it's a joy. It's been really nice. Thank you.
Is there anything I missed? Is there anything you want to share?
If you are listening to this, do check out our shows. We have a bunch of different kinds of shows that are really wonderful at Kerning Cultures, and you can find us on social. If you have any story ideas that you'd want to hear on any of our shows, we're always looking for producers. Regardless of experience, we can train you.
Yeah, you guys had a little academy type thing, right? So like a virtual workshop, Zoom kind of thing, right? Like a storytelling.
Yeah, it was really good. We had, I think, a couple hundred people join, which was insane.
Wow.
Hiba led it. She killed it. She did a great job. Yeah, and so we're I think one of the things I'm proud of with Kerning Cultures is that everyone who has worked on KC didn't have prior audio experience, at least the core team. Now we work with freelancers who are like legit, but so we all learned on the go, right? And so we're really good at the training piece, and that's never a criteria to not work with somebody that they don't have audio experience. I mean, of course, podcasting is new in the region in general, and so it's not something we expect. So that's an open invitation. If there's anything that we can teach you, we're always happy to do so.
Thank you so much, Hiba, and I look forward to every little thing you're putting out into the world. Thank you.
You too. Thank you, Tarek.
This is it for this week. Thank you for watching. If you want to support my work and get exclusive content, have a think about subscribing to my Patreon. There's also my secret podcast, extended interview, and Q&A. See you next week.